Are ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was a...
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Celestial Oddities Pair of Normal Guys podcast. I am Garrett Jagaman.
And I'll be your co-host, Daniel James.
We want to thank you for tuning in tonight. As always, we appreciate your patronage and also your support. If you are listening out there, make sure that you click the like, share, and follow button from whatever platform you're listening from, whether it be iTunes or iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Amazon, or Google. Doesn't matter. We air across all platforms, so listen where you feel most comfortable. But while you're doing that, please click those buttons, because the more that you do that, the more that it moves us up the podcast community rankings, more that it allows us to do with the show, more people that discover the show, and ultimately allows you to keep in touch with new episodes as they air and gives you access to all of our past archives. And folks, there's something for absolutely everyone who is a lover of the paranormal and supernatural. That is exactly what we do with the show every other week, 8 to 9:30 p.m., 8 to 9, 9:30, depends on the show. We bring you great topics of supernatural, paranormal, metaphysical, occult, everything in between. We bring on the show from a talk show platform to when we bring on guests, interview them, pick their brain, to everything in between. It's a great show for all things kind of bizarre and strange. So we really want to thank you for all your support. This is Season 2, Episode 2, so if you've missed our last season, you can always tune back and listen to all of those, as well as our most recent episode, which was a great recap with Daniel and I, talking about everything we did last season, what we've had going on in our personal lives, the new schedule that we got going on with the show, which is every other Thursday, as I mentioned, and some upcoming projects that we're dropping. So it's been pretty great, Dan. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm having a blast. I love this show. We're keeping the energy flowing. We
certainly are. And tonight we got another doozy for you, folks. Tonight our topic is going to be haunted objects. Everything from dolls to mirrors and paintings to man-made, spirit houses to Dybbuk boxes and everything in between. So I'm looking very forward to jumping into this with you, Dan.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I want to get into my alternative metaphysical perspective on these things as well.
No, certainly. So if you're listening out there, folks, make sure you share it around to people you think would be interested in this topic. If you have ideas of topics and guests and things that you would like to see on the show coming up, make sure you add our Celestial Oddities Pair of Normal Guys podcast page on Facebook. You can message us at celestialoddities@gmail.com. One way or another, make sure you tune into our networks. We would love to have you involved. We share videos, posts, ideas, topics, and thoughts, not only on the show, but also on our pages, which allows you to kind of join into the community as well. And if you are listening out there, if you go through Spreaker.com or Spreaker app, and that is Spreaker, Spreaker, that'll allow you not only to listen to the show like the other platforms, but this is the only platform that'll allow you to instant message us during the show to join along with topics and ask us questions during the show or our guests on the episodes that we do have guests. So, great way to be in tune with the show itself. So, Dan, what do you think of tonight's subject? I know you said you have want to share some of your metaphysical, standpoints on this interesting topic. Starting out, what has been your experience or thoughts, just from a basic standpoint before we dig in too deep, of haunted objects? Do you think it's something that is that is just and that is true, or do you think it's something that's more paranoia of people running wild? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm inclined to believe personally that we're dealing with a real phenomenon here. And I have a lot of metaphysical explanations that I feel would support that theory and that opinion as well. You know, my partner Lauren and I were sitting down talking about what would be a good idea, you know, for the next Celestial Oddities podcast episode. And one thing that I really want to explore in the paranormal is this concept of haunted objects or spirited objects. You know, I think is you could look at it however you want, but it more or less is the same thing. Now, let's start like this. When we say a haunted object, obviously you're thinking of a haunted house, things of that nature, but one of the most common things, one of the most popular ideas in haunted or spirited objects is the haunted doll. Am I correct?
Correct.
How many movies and horror stories have we, you know, seen about there being a possessed haunted doll? I mean, even look at the Twilight Zone, you know, where we have like the haunted puppet, you know, the marionette. And it's almost like one of those primal things that, like, when someone sees one of those old porcelain dolls, the sort of like Raggedy Ann style, you know, there's like this primal fear people have just looking at them, feeling like they're watching. You know, they're watching me. And then I actually know, believe it or not, a lot of women that collect dolls, creepy, you know, haunted dolls, where they'll order them online, or they'll go down to, you know, shops where you can get these really expensive antiques, you know, where there's a story attached to this particular doll that, you know, they have, that they're possessed in a sense. So this is tonight's episode, guys. We want to talk about these, not just dolls, but I'm going to get deeper into the concept that not only do I believe that objects can possess consciousness or possess the spirit of another entity, but I'm also privy to the idea that you can actually download, conjure, or program specific items with, or summon rather, specific entities into these objects as well. So we'll start there.
No, absolutely. I think a good place to start is dolls, and certainly something that has been legend and lore across movies, across history of just urban, you know, legends and old wives' tales and things that, you know, have a lot of backing behind it of people having experiences or knowing someone who knows someone who has had an experience. There's always a story pertaining to dolls out there, and I find it very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different cases. One of the first ones that'll come up, I think, that most people will know about is the Annabelle doll. You know, for those out there that maybe have heard of it and are not aware of all of the details, or maybe haven't heard of it, Annabelle was a doll in the early 1970s that was owned by a college student named Donna, and she started having very strange activity happening from this doll. And I don't remember the exact story of it. I remember that I think that they were playing around and there was a spirit, and don't quote me on this, I could be wrong, but if I'm remembering correctly, I believe that there was some type of activity happening, and they told the spirit that you have permission to enter this doll to communicate with us, if I'm thinking correctly, and it did. And then it started going, you know, absolutely crazy after that, and they needed help, and they reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are two of the most famous paranormal investigators of all time, husband and wife duo. Unfortunately now have both passed on, but they were very accredited paranormal investigators and researchers. They have been involved in very wild cases over the years. Most of you listening out there might recognize their names as being tied to the Conjure franchise, which was based on a true story of the actual Conjure house, which is in Rhode Island. So very interesting that they got called in on this one, and, you know, they got thousands of phone calls and tasks, you know, people asked them to come out and check, that they would either come out and debunk or they would turn it down. They only really got themselves involved in what they thought were true possible cases. And this is one they got involved with, and they did think that it was valid. And they did take the doll, or, was given the doll from Donna, and they housed it in their home, because within their home they had a personal museum, which was collections of all the different haunted items or strange, bizarre artifacts and items from the different hauntings that they investigated and helped cleanse and banish. And Annabelle was one of them. She's housed in a display case there with a sign that says "Do not touch" or "Do not open." And it is still there with the Warren family in their estate, in their museum, and you still can go see that, I believe. But there's been some imposters over the years. Even here in Pittsburgh, there was a paranormal tour company that claimed to have had the real Annabelle, available to come and see, which was a crock of shit, and it was a lie, and ended up really causing these people a lot of backlash. But no, the real Annabelle is still housed at the Ed and Lorraine Warren home and foundation, and she is one of the most known, although I won't say the craziest Tower of Dolls out there. She is by far one of the most popularized.
I would agree. Yeah, it's it's funny that you mentioned The Conjuring, because there's actually a new film out right now. It's being advertised. There's trailers out for another one. They keep that franchise going.
They've been building it up. I know that I've only seen the first one.
Same.
I've heard some people like the second and beyond, and some people didn't. I only really watched the first. No, I did think, as far as a haunting style movie, there, it was very popular there for a while. It still is, but I mean, you have peak seasons for things where, for these couple years, this type of movie is a hit. And during that time period, with all the Paranormal Activity movie and franchise that came out, some of the other ones, the Sinister, and some of these other movies that came out, it was a very big time for haunted house movies and haunted objects. So it came out at a good time and certainly built up a lot of buzz from it and launched this franchise. But I do find it interesting that not only is the movie pretty wild, but the story itself of the family that was really afflicted with this haunting was quite interesting as well. If you go back and read some of the documents, or if you get the chance to actually hear any of the original audio clips of the Warrens from the real investigation, I was able to get a chance to hear. It was pretty wild.
Yeah. And that's a more, with the doll as well, that's a more noteworthy, example of what we're talking about tonight. And I'm sure that now, guys, I consider Garrett as an expert in paranormal investigations and going out in the field and working with spirit. And so, Garrett, I want to ask you what your opinion on, let's start with houses, okay? Because I have a lot of things to say about the possession and the charging of items. But let's talk about houses first. So what would you think about the concept that when a house is haunted, when there is a residual energy there, whether it's deceased human or something else, because we know that there's a variety of other things that can occupy a home or a property, or even geographical location that are non-human as well, that are still in spirit form. Would you say the most common reason for the possession of that house is due to a trauma or due to some sort of tragedy? Or would you say that entities that move into a house or a property or a geographical location, because it could also be outside as well, as an alternative to the theory that these places are charged through trauma and tragedy, would you say that things maybe come passing through and that they come and go? Or let's start here. So what is your belief on how properties and locations become spirited and charged with, entities and consciousness?
That's certainly a good question, and I think it's a little mixture of both. I do think that there are different entities tied to a home or property for one reason or another, whether it was the area that they grew up, or they went to school there, or they died there, or they have some type of connection still to the physical realm, and for some reason or another they stick around that location. That has certainly been proven over time with different investigations, not only that others have done, but certainly that I have done myself, that we have gotten names or gotten info from someone who was tied to that property. So that does happen. I do think, though, often that a lot of the spirits that people come into contact with, and this is unbeknownst to a lot of people, I think, who think differently, it's not always the spirits or the entities from that location. So often do paranormal investigators go out to a building and they're like, what year did you live here? How did you die here? Meanwhile, the entities they're talking to could be from halfway across the world, or they could have never been human to begin with. And I think that's a common misconception of people, that they believe that this house is haunted by the spirits of people who lived here. It could be just that for some reason something was passing through on the ethereal realm and somehow liked that area, and that area connects with the physical realm, and that happens to be your house. And sometimes that is the case, so it goes kind of both ways. I think that, sometimes spirits choose to stay connected and choose to want to stay behind because they have unfinished business, or they don't want to leave their family, so they choose to stick around for a while, or, to watch over people they loved. Maybe they have a fear of moving on, because just as most human beings have a fear of dying, don't think that ends when you die. If you are still cognizant of what you are, of your spirit, as you leave the body, you still have a journey, a big journey to go, and some people are afraid to take that journey.
Absolutely.
So they stick around. But just as much as that is the truth, some people's lives are cut shorter unexpectedly, and they don't quite understand what happens. If you are taken instantly out of this life without seeing it coming, and just boom, you're dead. Sometimes it happens so fast that you snap out of your physical body into your full cognizant spiritual body, and you don't quite understand what's going on. You know that you're not the same as before, but you don't understand you're dead. You don't really grasp that, and sometimes you are left as a wandering dead or a wandering spirit. And that happens a lot, and there's a lot of spirits out there that are lost. They don't quite know how to move on, because the normal process when someone dies is that over a short span of time after the life force leaves the body, your silver cord that connects you to your astral body will then sever, and then you can transition on to the next realm correctly. When it happens so suddenly and it's instantly just snapped or cut, you don't have that spiritual instinct take hold for you to know how to journey on forward properly, but you also didn't have time to come to the realization that you left properly. So you get left in that limbo stage of, I don't know I'm dead, but I know I'm not alive, but where do I go, but do I stay? And you get kind of locked into this battle of tug and war of the worlds, of the spiritual dimensions, and that, I think, is a good deal of spirits. But folks, don't always believe that because you're experiencing a spirit or activity somewhere, that necessarily means that is from a human-bound, once-upon-a-time living spirit, and don't also believe that is from a spirit that resided in that property. It could have absolutely nothing to do with it. The spiritual and ethereal realm is not like the physical realm. It doesn't line up exactly the same where everyone stays in the same area. Once you become spirit, you can transfer anywhere to any time instantly. You are a spirit. Instantly. So if you want to think of the Great Wall of China, and poof, you're
not bound by time or space.
Yeah, time and space does not exist anymore. You are truly endless, and depending upon how much, this gets more into the ritual magic side of things, but depending upon how much personal energy and power you store, once you leave, it depends on how much power you take with you and what you can do in that next realm. So that would be, from my experiences and practices over the years, what I have come across with that question.
Very cool. I totally resonate with that. It makes a lot of sense. And as we talk about not just a property or a location or a house, but we are talking about dolls and toys and statues and paintings, and we see in a lot of horror films and ghost stories and things of that nature about, say, for example, a painting that's in an old home that it's believed that it contains like the spirit of the person that it depicts, things of that nature. So then we could ask, okay, well, how does a physical object in our 3D reality get charged or possessed, for lack of a better term, by the consciousness of another entity? I do believe that it can happen from a trauma that's, say, for example, the comb of a girl that, was murdered and went through some sort of tragic experience. Perhaps her consciousness or maybe her trauma of the death can get transferred to that object, and then it can in a sense contain an aspect of her energy that could be malevolent or mischievous, or any number of characteristics and traits could follow this comb or this object around. And that's maybe one way, for example, how a toy or a doll or a statue or a painting could contain the consciousness of maybe a more malevolent or sort of consciousness or entity. Because when people think about a haunted doll, that's kind of like the common theme. Is it A, it's evil, B, it's some tortured soul that was bound to this thing through the tragedy of its death, and that's maybe like a common theme. But let me tell you guys about my first experience in getting into a spirited object. Okay, when I was a teenager, late teens, maybe like 17, 18, I was living in Olympia, Washington. And at the time growing up, it was a very, what I would call, paranormal area. It's got high traffic of ley line systems. We're talking regular sightings of UFOs, regular haunted houses and shadow people. I'm seeing full apparitions of, creatures and things from the fairy realm manifesting. This was like just a hot spot growing up in my teenage years where these occurrences were common. Okay, just seeing all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I was kind of drawn to that sort of like esoterica, that sort of metaphysical, spirited sort of like look into reality, because I was always surrounded by all of these paranormal occurrences that it was like normal. It was just common for me to have these, contact experiences with spirit all the time. And in Olympia, Washington, it was what I would call like a very new agey, at least back then. It's not so much anymore, but it was a very new agey sort of community where that you have a lot of people practicing tarot and doing voodoo and other forms of magic and working with crystals and all of that stuff. It was common for those communities in that area, and I loved the people. I gravitated to that community because I was, questioning reality and always searching for more. And so I felt like people, who are working with energy and magic in that way, they had a lot more answers than I was able to find on my own. And so I stumbled upon a shop in downtown Olympia, Washington, and it was ran by a husband and wife. And they were, we had one of them, the wife was a Mambo priestess, and a seasoned Mambo priestess. And then the other gentleman was a shaman, and worked with magic and spirit in a lot of different ways. And I would go into this shop all the time to get tarot card readings, and she was a medium as well, so I could get like psychic readings and things like that. And they had all the cool stuff, the statues and the crystals and the incense and the sage and all, the tapestries, the cool stuff, when you're a teenager. And the owner of the shop, who worked behind the counter, he had a giant chest, okay, behind his counter that was full of all kinds of tokens and knickknacks and money and relics and totems. All kinds of stuff was in this big chest. And I asked him, and I said, "What is that? Why do you keep that there, and where did the items keep coming from?" And he goes, "Well, that's my dragon's hoard." And I said, "That sounds cool. Can you tell me more about that? What does that mean?" And he goes, "Well, I have the spirit of a dragon protecting my store. He protects this shop, like, almost in a sense, a guardian or security for this, chamber. I summoned this being to protect it. And this dragon's horde is a symbol of that spirit that protects this property. And I said, well, that is amazing. That's awesome, because I've always resonated with dragons. I have an affinity to dragons. I know them to be real in other dimensions. And so the fact that you have one sort of protecting this, your business here, it resonates with me, because you could, when you walked into the store, it wasn't just the things and the incense, but you could feel like a protective presence. And I know this to be his dragon. So I said, okay, well, so you have this dragon's horde, which serves as a symbol of the spirit that protects the store itself. How did you do that? How did this happen? Like, what's the process? So he explained it to me, and he offered to teach me a summoning ritual that would basically reach the higher dimensions, the lighter densities, the ether itself. We're talking a spirit here, where you can cast a call for protection, and as long as your need for protection is honest and pure and justified, coming from a place of truth and not some sort of malevolent endeavor, you could almost, in a sense, ask for spirit to bring you this dragon guardian, and you will connect to the consciousness of an actual dragon being. And if it is interested and willing in taking you on, you can actually summon this being from the dimension that they come from, these dragon energies, and you'll bond with it and create, establish like a connection to it. And then what you need during your summoning ritual, this is why he has the dragon's horde, you need like a relic or a totem that serves as a symbol of that spirit that it can then almost possess. I don't really like using that word, but it can occupy, it can summon into the thing. And so everybody knows that dragons, in our lore, at least in our mythology, they like shiny riches, and they have, some fucking cave full of treasure somewhere. That's the way it's depicted, at least in our mythology. And they understand that as a very human aspect to, their description. And so it serves as a token for them of value. So he has the guy had this giant chest full of all of these really cool things that you can actually donate to. Anybody can gift an item to the dragon's horde, and it serves as like a sign of respect to the property and things of that nature. And so he teaches me the summoning ritual, because at the time I needed protection for something that was going on in my life, and I felt like I trusted spirit to manifest something for me that would be honest and true and virtuous to protect me in a time of need. And so I know it's a little cliche, but I bought a dragon statue that was also a candle holder. I know it sounds cheesy, but I was 17 and I didn't really know what I was doing here. And it also doubled as a very small little dragon's horde. So if you guys go to our Celestial Oddities Facebook group, I'll post a picture of it in the group tonight after the show, and you can see exactly what it looked like. But it was a green dragon statue, and then if you lift up the top half, he's sitting on top of a little treasure chest, and inside was just like a small little space where you could put a few small tokens. And when I say a few small tokens, I mean some rings, some small jewelry, some coins, things of that nature. And it was the symbol of a dragon's horde. It's his treasure trove. So I have this symbol now, and I decided to use the dragon statue as the totem, the relic, that I could summon my dragon consciousness into this thing, and then this item, this object, would serve as a symbol of its presence, a symbol of its protection in my home, on my property, or just with me whenever I needed it. So I do the ritual, I do the summoning ritual, and I literally could feel the presence of a very powerful being sort of enter the room that I was in and swirl around me. And this wasn't something that I could see, but it was something that I could feel very strongly. And I was actually scared. I was very scared because this was new to me and I'd never done anything like it before. And you could feel the presence of this being sizing me up, you know, like seeing, is my intent for summoning him pure, or is it selfish in some way? Does it have some sort of agenda, or is it really just, I would like to not only summon you for protection, but I would also like to develop a lasting, lifelong relationship with you? Because the gentleman had told me that if I summon this dragon and it works, and I find one that is willing to work with me, it would be a lifelong bond. The dragon would never leave. It would stay attached to the totem that I assign it, which was the small statue with the dragon's horde in it, forever. You know, just endlessly. It wouldn't leave. And so it's a very, you know, implicating thing that you have to consider when doing this. It's not like you're getting a puppy. You know, you're making a spirited bond to a very powerful entity that exists, you know, from another dimension.
Absolutely. I mean, it's strong.
Strong energy. And you know these things exist. You know that they're out there, and they're arguably more real than our physical reality, but that's another episode. So I summon the dragon, and the first thing you're supposed to do when you feel its presence is you ask for its name. And you're supposed to write down the name that comes to your mind as soon as you feel its presence. And so I felt it come into the room, and I have a pen and paper in hand, and I say, what is your name? What is your name, dragon? And it says to me, Lion-O. And it's spelled Lianaux. Lion-O. And I could just feel that, you know, and I put it down on the paper, and I tore the name off the paper, and I folded it up, and I put it in the dragon's horde. And that was the first thing that I placed in it. So now I have this bond. I have this connection. I've summoned the spirit of a dragon entity that is, in a sense, attached to this physical object, this totem relic. And his spirit, I don't want to say is contained within the statue, but the statue serves as a symbol of its presence and the bond that we have. And ever since then, this Lion-O was with me in my home, and I could feel its presence. And whenever I was upset, or whenever I was angry, or whenever I was sad, I could almost feel a connection to the dragon itself. And then I would have visualizations, you know, in my mind's eye, in my third eye, of it almost kind of swirling around and fueling my emotions in whatever they were. It would amplify them, but it was always in like a loving way. It was always in like a protective way. Like, you know, I kind of picture the movie Dragonheart when it's raining, you know, and he puts his wing over Bowen to shield him from the rain, you know, because they're friends. And that was the energy and the presence that I always felt of that dragon Lion-O. And I'm in my mid-30s now. Okay, so I did this when I was like 18 years old, and the dragon's been with me ever since. Now, this is a long-winded story, but this is an example of how you can not only can objects get possessed through almost the imprinting of a trauma or a tragedy. That energy, you know, tends to get very dense and attached to things, but you can actually program items deliberately also. Now, I did this through a ritual that was very easy to do, very basic, only took a couple minutes, but it was more so about the intention that you had, which is what I believe fuels the power of conjuring these things and then sort of downloading them into the object. So that's my story that I wanted to share with you guys. I summoned a dragon, and his spirit was attached to this item. And I can actually say one more thing, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Garrett. But I'll tell you guys this, okay? Here's one thing. The totem meant very much to me, and I would put small little mementos in this in his little dragon's horde that meant something to me. Like if I went on a trip or I did some traveling or I had sort of a bond or something important happened between me and a person and there was a small little item attached, whether like we went walking on a beach and we got beach glass, I put a piece of the beach glass in here. If I was given a special coin, I would put it in there. And these were all gifts to Lion-O as a sign of respect to him and an offering to him in the service that he provided me of protection. And I even put rings in there. They were personal to me. So my partner at the time, her and I got into a big fight, and we had a fireplace, okay? She got angry with me, and she threw my dragon statue in the fire.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you guys, that was a bad thing. That was a really bad thing for both her and I. Lion-O immediately got very angry with me that I let his symbol, the symbol of his presence, that I let that happen to him. That's strike one. Strike two, my partner at the time, he got very angry at her because not only was it a sign of disrespect to him, but it was a direct attack on me. Okay? She instantly got very ill. She got sick. She got a headache. She wasn't feeling good. She was feeling uneasy. She was having an anxiety attack. And I basically had to tell him to stop. I had to call off the dogs. Okay? This is how serious it is that we're talking here, that I had a real dragon from spirit that, you know, had a connection to me through that item that she threw in the fireplace. Now, I got all the items out. The statue mostly melted, but I got all of the tokens out of his dragon's hoard, but most of the statue did melt. The top half did. I still salvaged the bottom half. And I still have it to this day. I still have the bottom half of that dragon's hoard, which is very small. I mean, it fits in the palm of your hand. And I still have all the original items that I had placed in it, and I keep them tucked away, you know, safely in my home. And that's all that I have left of that particular totem and that particular attachment to Lion-O. Now, since then, end of the story here, since then, Lion-O is still with me, and based on my beliefs in the way reality works and the way energy moves, I transcended the need for the physical object. Okay, because everything within our reality is an aspect of our own consciousness in some way, shape, or form. And I knew that the physical totem had served its purpose, and he and I, our bond had transcended the need for the totem, which I'm grateful for because he was really mad when that totem was destroyed. But he and I are together now, and I don't have that symbol anymore. But the moral of the story is that you can summon and conjure and download the consciousness of an entity into an object the same way I've described. And you might need a specific ritual to do that, but you could also make your own summoning ritual. Be careful. You could also make your own summoning ritual to download the consciousness of an entity into physical objects as well. So, Garrett, tell us a little bit about how you would use magic and some of the practices that you use and you prefer, how you would get an entity of your preference into an object. What do you know about this?
So, sidestep to just that, even though it'll still pertain to the same, is you, when telling me, your experience, it made me think there's, I don't know if you've ever heard of, but there's totems that are called Nakisi Nkondi.
Okay.
And they are from the Congo region in the Congo of Africa, and these are really cool totems that this culture used, that they made these figures, these totems that had a hollowed out stomach, that they would use different herbs and different items that they would put inside of this totem. Okay. Then it would be sealed with a mirror facing outward so that there was always a reflection there. The mirror was important. And the Congo medicine men would perform these rituals to imbue these things with spiritual life, where now a spirit would be housed in this totem. Now, What makes these very unique and interesting is it was opposite of, I mean, similar but opposite of a voodoo, a voodoo doll. So a lot of times the town would all use these dolls, maybe the same one. Some people had their own individual, but there was larger ones that the whole town would use. And what it was is, if someone had done you wrong and stole something from you or done you an injustice, you would go to the Nkundi and you would nail a nail into the effigy of this totem. And that would awaken the spirit within it and know that someone has done you wrong, and they would seek out the person who has done you wrong and get your retribution for you. And if you look up pictures of these, and folks, I'll post, like Daniel said, I'll post a picture of one of these on our Facebook page. But a lot of them have hundreds of nails in them, chains around them, spikes in them, knives in them. They use these things almost as voodoo dolls, but kind of different than just targeting one person. They were a community effigy that you would nail into to seek retribution for you. And they're really cool, and they were housed with different things, same as your dragon totem, that kept them alive and were symbolic of this spirit that worked with that region of the Congo. So very cool, folks. If you get a chance, look up Nkisi Nkundi, and I will be also posting a picture of that in our group. Now, as far as Daniel's question of how I use that personally in my own practice, there are different ways. I mean, I am, aside from being a paranormal investigator, I am very avid in the field of ceremonial magic and black magic. So I do a lot of arts of invocation and evocation, as well as necromancy, of summoning spirits of the dead, summoning chthonic spirits and demonic spirits, and working with these energies and intelligences to learn, to grow, to commune and convene with. And there's different ways that we use these things. Sigils are the calling card of a lot of the different spirits that are out there. Some have been given from spirits themselves and kind of given to the practitioner to say, hey, that's a good way of summoning me. Others have been drawn by man and associated with this entity, and through a lot of metaphysical energy and focus on those sigils, and a lot of people using them over time, it has become their calling card. But that is a way that you can imbue a symbol with energy of these spirits. Now, what some people will do is use this as a talisman or as a pentacle, and they will, upon summoning the spirit, ask it to imbue that sigil or that pendant or that talisman, that ring, whatever it might be, with the spiritual energy of the spirit you're communicating with. And then they will wear that. A lot of times it's a talisman that they wear around their neck as like a pendant. And there's different things you can do. You can use that not only for spirits, but you can use that for, astrological workings as well, and imbue that with the spiritual energy of Mars and of Jupiter and Venus. And these planetary alignments give it certain qualities. These planets are associated with giving certain things. Mars, for example, it falls on the tree of life and falls under Geburah, and that is imbued with kind of chaos in a way, where Mars is a very confrontational, very intense, boiling over type of energy. So there's different associations like that you can use and imbue an item with to work with. But when it comes to spirits, there's a lot of different ways, from sigils to talismans to, having them, go out and do workings for you and use certain items that they put power into to use in your ritual workings that'll strengthen it. So maybe they will imbue a certain type of powder. There's powder called gopher dust that's used a lot in Vodun or in voodoo, that you could use and sprinkle it on a type of voodoo doll. And that dust that you just sprinkled on now with the power of that demonic spirit can cause in real life manifestations in the person you're targeting and cause them to become confused and bewildered. It sounds crazy, folks. I know there's a lot of people out there saying, like, this just sounds like, gibberish, but no, magic is very, very real, and your will and intent intent, if focused to a high enough degree, you can work with things that seem almost impossible. And if you focus and work with them tightly enough, you can make things happen to people halfway across the planet, whether it be an attack on someone, whether it be to benefit someone from an ailment that they have and help them get cured, to many things in between. And then one of the last ones I would mention is similar to what we were talking about, effigies or statues. You can create and make effigies of certain spirits that you're working with and draw them into that effigy. Now, it doesn't mean that that entire being is now trapped forever in that. What that means is it leaves a part of its demonic essence in that specific piece of equipment or that effigy, and now it is imbued with that. So they are still moving around, the spiritual realms, doing what it is that they do. They can be called by others, but now there will always be a small fragment of their energy left with that statue. And this can be used for many different purposes, from strengthening your rituals to making it a more direct and easy connection to imbue certain items without having to call the full force itself down. You can work with that small piece of what's at your altar, or some people worship those effigies and put a lot of energy into them, making them stronger and stronger. So now that little seed that it left behind has grown into its own stream of power. Because folks, one thing I'll say about these items, there's a lot of different types of spirits out there. There are the spirits of the dead, and within that section of things, there are several different categories. Then you do have true non-human external beings that are out there that live freely of mankind, that were never human, whether they be angelic, whether they be demonic. Then you have, thought forms and egregores that people have created themselves. Now, some people will say, if they're created themselves, they're fake. No. The thing is, if enough metaphysical energy and thought and will are pushed into something, it will actually create it in the spiritual realm. And if you have something like, have you seen this man, like we talked about last year in one of our episodes? That gentleman, when enough people start thinking about that, it starts to grow. Same thing with Slender Man and a lot of these other things out there. Whenever you start to feed enough energy to it, it actually takes on a life form of its own, and it starts to collect from the, ultimate consciousness, the thoughts and ideas and a backstory, and it starts to manifest into a intelligent being. Think of the Terminator. It once was a machine turned into a free thinking device that's now set to take over. That is the same thing of some egregores, that they are charged, they are given power, they now lust for power. They can tap into the ultimate consciousness, and they can feed from that and learn and grow and become bigger and bigger. Same thing with archetypes, the gods. Gods, in pretty much all cases, I would say, are man-made from the people of the human realm, and then they are given so much respect and reverence that they grow to these mighty things that are mightier than anything that's ever existed. Meanwhile, they were created by us, but we've given them so much power that, of course, you can call upon Christ, you can call upon Lucifer, you can call upon these different forces, and tremendous things can happen if you know what you're doing. But it doesn't mean that spirit is something that was free thinking and external. It could mean that it's just now become its own powerful source. It's just an egregore that has taken on life of its own. So that's a big miscommunication from a lot of people as well, is they think that all spirits are external or all spirits are internal. Some are external, some are a little mixture of both. But there's a lot of different classifications, folks. It's not as simple as one or two things. There are millions of different things out there. The Fae, shadow people, ghosts, all these different things that exist, whether man-made, whether external, they do exist, because once they become real, they become real.
Right, and I love that you said that, and also, because you go to your friend's house and she's got the creepy doll. Is it possessed by some sort of entity? Maybe not. But based on the power of your belief and your free will, you can charge that thing with something that will manifest an experience for you. you know? And I think that a lot of times that's where a lot of, you know, our experiences come from, is like the very powerfully driving engine that is fear can supercharge something into manifesting in a physical way. And I think that we can actually inadvertently summon things into objects, or even draw a presence into your space that you actually created yourself, like you mentioned in the egregors concept. Is a very powerful thing that, you know, I think that we should try to keep mentioning on the show as often as possible, because the power of your thought and your subconscious can create physical matter. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that a lot of times that is the case. Is sometimes if you go and you have something weird happen at your house that could be completely explainable, it still doesn't mean that it isn't odd. Something odd can happen because you are on a ley line that has a lot of energy, because limestone depositories are under your house with an underground stream that you don't know about, and it causes magnetic forces to cause things in the house to move from time to time across the shelf on their own, which scientifically could be explained without anything paranormal happening, but you see that happening. There's already that magnetic static in the air. There's already the force and the energy needed to create something so powerful, but it doesn't actually exist. Now your paranoia starts to kick in, and you start to feed the energy and say, there's a ghost here, there's a spirit. Your whole family starts to believe that. You all start talking about it. You tell your friends, your family, your coworkers. People come over for barbecues. They experience something. They feed the fire. They feed the fire. Then you do almost create an egregore of a so-called spirit of the dead, a ghost. There's a ghost in this house. Well, now something is in that house that was made internally that is now external, that never was the actual ghost of the, you know, the living, but you keep feeding it because you're scared of it and you're kind of worried. And then what does it do? It knows that its fuel source is fear. It is chaos. It is all these things that give off metaphysical condensation that it feeds from. And what does it do? It moves things now its own. So even though it was natural before, now it no longer is. It does slam doors, because every time you jump, every time you get scared, and every time you're under the covers clutching yourself and saying, oh my God, please don't let it get to me, all that fear and emotion that you're putting off is now food for it to get stronger and stronger and stronger. The same as most actual ghosts. A lot of spirits of the dead, everyone moves on. You never die, folks. It's impossible. You do not die. Your body will, you will not. What makes you will still live on. Pieces of that will fall away like the shedding of a snake, but the rest of the main essence will continue to go. And most of them will move on and go to higher things. You will either, possibly reincarnate if you haven't reached the ultimate, power that you need. You'll take on other duties. You will ascend. Some will come back here by choice or for other reasons as well. But some are stuck here because they haven't lived good lives, and they will continue to be the same asshole that they were in real life. And people don't understand that is you're the same person in death as you are in life. Your spirit is you. Yes, the mind is GPS, your body is the vehicle, your spirit is the driver. But if you drive like an asshole, it's probably because you're an asshole. So even though your car and your GPS might be taken away, the asshole's still there. So whenever you're a spirit, you are that way. So you're going to be that rude, mean, treacherous spirit out there, and they don't ascend because they weren't the right type of mind to ascend. So what do? They just stick around. And what do they need to stick around and be powerful and at least enjoy the shit that they're in? They need energy. And how do they get that? They get that through fear and by playing off your emotions. So a lot of times you are interacting with spirits out there. You are interacting with actually negative energies. Not always, but a lot of times. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. Facts. So
now, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you.
I was going to say another one that I thought was, it doesn't exist anymore, but there was that city that was found. What the hell am I trying to say here? Let me think for a second. They found that hidden city in China, and the terracotta army in China. that was discovered, which if you haven't looked that up, folks, that is mind-blowing, where they found thousands upon thousands of statues, chariots, horses, men in armor. There was an entire terracotta army that was made. I mean, the amount of elaborateness to these statues are amazing. And it was said to be an army that was always there on guard, and if it was ever touched, harmed, or destroyed, that it would curse the land. Well, sure enough, the government bought it, and they tore the whole goddamn thing down and put it in shopping centers. But this was a magnificent archaeological find, and it's really a shame that they destroyed it for such silly things. But it was one of those things that, whether it's true or not, was said to have been, had a spiritual force in those statues that guarded the land and would curse the land if ever torn down. Now, I don't know if anything's ever happened since they've torn them down, but I always found that to be, quite fascinating, as far as items, with spiritual energy. Same as... There's the goddess of the death statue, the woman from Lem, and that is a real interesting one that I had looked into. And I'll give you guys some facts on this one. I actually had pulled some stuff up, and it said, let me see here. It says the artifact was crafted around 3500 BC and found in Cyprus in 1878. And of the families that it belonged to over the generations, each one has been torn apart by death. Within 6 years of ownership, all 7 members of the first family had perished. Once the second owner, Ivor Minucci, acquired it, death came for him and his family after only 4 years. The statue then vanished for a long while, but when the new third family eventually laid claim to it, several members died. However, 2 of the remaining members very wisely donated the artifact to the Royal Scottish Museum. So that's something to look into as well, guys. It's a pretty crazy-looking artifact that is called the Goddess of Death. And everyone who's ever owned her has had found a very horrible death. And you're talking quite a few people over the years that it's had it in history. So pretty wild, some of the curses and some of these spiritual items.
Very fascinating, yeah. And I hope that we were able to talk about this in a way that gives people a broad scope and give them the discernment to look at, the possession of objects from a lot of different ways. Could it be negative? Yes. Could it be positive? Absolutely. Can it happen passively or by accident? Sometimes. Can you manifest these things with the power of your own free will? Definitely.
And could you be just, one of those rare times that you found a portal of sorts and somehow we don't understand how it happens, but that has happened as well. The Dark Mirror, which is a part of the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, is said to show you very wild things within it. Now, it's not uncommon for scryers in ceremonial magic to use for looking in divination and looking in the future and the past. In fact, a lot of demonic summoning and evocation will use that because it's easier to communicate with a spirit through a substance like a mirror or through incense smoke. Because, let's face it, folks, if anybody ever tells you that they've summoned a spirit and they've literally shown up, full physical without incense or anything like that, they're lying to you. It can show up in smoke. They can show up in a medium of some sort.
Like an element.
An element of some sort. They don't just show up and walk in front of you. That's fairy tales. But one popular way of doing that is using a black mirror or an obsidian mirror for scrying. And there's a famous mirror that's a part of this traveling museum that someone had bought. I think they bought it from an estate sale, and they had it in their home, and they started seeing very wild things about their own life and grotesque things that they couldn't physically handle or mentally handle. So they had sold it off to a museum, and people have visited at the museum staring into it said that they have seen their own death, have seen wild things within it, which is common for scrying. A lot of times people think they're going to look in and see the future, and it's always going to be this, who wins the Super Bowl 5 years from now so you can win bets. They always think it's going to be something advantageous advantageous to them. And a lot of times it shows you horrible things that you would never want to see, but still you see, because just because you want to see the future doesn't mean it's going to show you what you want to see in the future. So that was always an interesting thing. And I think before we wrap up here, I think a lot of folks are probably excited to hear about the Dybbuk box. That is something that's become popular in the last 10, 15 years. Some people might say, I don't know about that, or, can you explain a little bit more about that? Dybbuk boxes, was originally, the original one was a wine cabinet claimed to be haunted by a Dybbuk, and the concept of Dybbuks are from Jewish mythology. The box gained notoriety when it was auctioned on eBay by the owner Kevin Manis, who created a story featuring Jewish Holocaust survivors and paranormal claims as part of the eBay's item description. Now, Dybbuk is a malevolent wandering spirit that enters and possesses the body of a living person until it is exorcised. They are a malicious possessing spirit, like I said, believed to be a dislocated soul of a dead person, and supposedly leaves the host's body once it has accomplished its goal, sometimes after and only when being exorcised. So, very interesting that a gentleman had bought this or had obtained it. The original owner was a Holocaust survivor. Somehow, that gentleman and the guy who bought it said strange activity kept happening, nightmares kept happening around this box. It was sealed. It was told never to be opened. He sold it on eBay. Baggins bought it for his museum of the paranormal. Post Malone had visited that and touched it during one of his episodes, and apparently still is being afflicted with problems with it. I don't know if I believe in all that shit, but I do believe that these boxes and things can exist, because I know people, in fact, who have done practices of calling down spirits into boxes and vessels, as we have already talked about. But part of the Goetia, which is a system specifically working with 72 demonic spirits of, said King Solomon. It wasn't really King Solomon who wrote the book, but it was said to be King Solomon who worked with these 72 spirits to build the Temple of Jerusalem. A part of the process of doing Goetic magic and Solomonic magic is there is a box that you can draw them down into, or as the old Arabian Nights tell, it talks about drawing them down into a brass vessel, almost like a genie lamp, because there's a lot of people that say that the daemons of the Goetia are actually the jinn. So these things can be brought down into boxes, and that's very real. So even though it sounds like fantasy, it is possible to bring down and whether house it there or trap it there, put a spirit into something like a Dybbuk box, which is really just a box that they're calling it a Dybbuk box because of the type of spirit. So that is something I believe can happen. Since then, it's become an internet craze. I see people selling them all over the place, and you see all these YouTubers that, will do anything for likes. They're like, I just bought a Dybbuk box off of eBay, or they'll be like, I bought it off the black web, and we're gonna open it. Web. Yeah, we bought it off the dark web, and we're gonna do a reaction video to us opening it right now. Meanwhile, some asshole who made it in their garage, it has nothing to do with anything. But do I believe that these type of devices could exist? Yes, and another reason I say that, and was one of the last things we wanted to talk about, and we'll jump back to Daniel here, is part of necromancy is using what is called spirit houses. This is not only used in necromancy, this is used in other cultures throughout the world where there are forests in the world. In fact, a horror movie just came out, I think, called Spirit House, the last couple of years, and it's a forest, all spirit houses for the dead. But in necromancy, you use spirit houses, which is, once again, a vessel that you can use as a way of connecting that spirit more closely to that location. So I could create a spirit house here on my altar. I could work with whatever spirits are in this area, or call upon a specific spirit of the spiritual world, and through certain ritualistic practices, certain devotional rites and offerings and sacrifices and things you can do. When I say sacrificing, folks, I don't mean it necessarily has to be like killing something. I mean, sacrifices can be, as Daniel talked about, giving it devotional items and things that are a tribute to it. Yeah. And by doing these things, you can draw down the power of that spirit and ask it if it would like to house itself in that box, in that vessel, in that little house that you built. And a lot of times they will, because they aren't exactly in the human world anymore. It's some of them would like to be. So sometimes they will connect themselves to that, and it's an easy way that you can go back to that item again and again and actually communicate with this spirit. So you can go and do certain things to wake it back up and talk to it, and it'll be there to communicate. You don't have to go through such a process to bring it back, because it is always partially there. And that is a big thing in a lot of religions, and like I said, especially in the art of necromancy, it is used heavily. And so there are a lot of different devices and technologies within magic and within the paranormal that can be used, or that have been used, or just, ironically has happened without anybody doing it specifically, that have housed these types of metaphysical powers and energies.
So, guys, let us know. Do you have a spirited object? Do you have a totem or a relic or a memento that you believe contains the spirit or the consciousness of an entity? Let us know in our Facebook group. Send us an email about it. But share your stories. Sometimes family members will pass an item down that claim that it contains the spirit of, a ghost or an alien or something. Let us know what you guys have in your possession, or an item that you've come across that you believe contains the consciousness of an entity. We're curious to hear about it. I've exposed myself and shared you the story of my dragon Lion-O. What do you guys have?
No, we would love to hear it. So please, if you do have any experiences or stories, or know anybody close to you that has, we always are looking for great topics and ideas. We do random episodes throughout each season where we do bring on people to tell their stories, or they can send them in and we will read them off. So we will be doing that again this season alongside of our normal episodes like tonight, and our episodes where we interview people. So there'll be a lot of great things coming for you, but share us your stories, send us your pictures. If you have an item that you're terrified of and you think it truly houses some type of spiritual energy and you've been looking to get rid of it but no one wants to take it, I will gladly take it from you. So if you are looking, I actually have several behind me. I do have someone who reached out to me because there was a mirror. Ironically enough, we talked about mirrors tonight. There was a mirror causing havoc within their home. They called me and asked what they could do with it. I came, I cleansed the area, I took the mirror, and it is now in my possession. It's actually about 10 feet behind me right now. I do have a haunted picture that personally haunted me as a child in my home, which was very haunted, and I've talked about it on the show many times. It was a picture that would move, that was very malicious. A lot of wild things happened. And I had asked my mother, do you still have that picture? And it was wrapped up in the attic for many years. And sure enough, she did. And it is now in my possession again, along with several other things that I own. So very similar to Ed and Lorraine Warren, I do collect haunted items and keep them here in my ritual chamber with certain protections and things around, that they can be active within this room, but they are confined within this room. So I do it in the safest way I can, as did they. And it's better to be put into a place where they can still be, what they are safely, than in your home where they could cause you turmoil. So if you have an item, let us know. We'll see what we can do to help you out. Post your pictures and your thoughts. Me and Dan will be posting some different totems and things of tonight's episode. I think after each one of our episodes, we'll always make some posts of things associated with that as further content for you. That'll be a new thing we start doing as well. Please join the Facebook page if you haven't already. And if you have any ideas or thoughts, send us an email at celestialoddities@gmail.com.
And yeah, in closing, guys, what I will say is, if you have an item that you can't part ways with, however you would like some help or assistance in perhaps releasing the energy from it, that may be something that I can help with. And once again, get a hold of us via email, reach out to us on the Facebook group. We'd be happy to help.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we will catch you in 2 weeks with another great topic, which we'll be releasing in the next couple of days. We'll have an events page. Keep an eye out for it. Spread it around. Hit the like button. And I just want to say thank you again for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Catch you next time.
Catch you next time on Celestial Oddities.